Just an aside up front here, this is my first review for the YouTube channel. I'll start by saying that this is obviously an opinion, though I hear the internet doesn't really care one way or the other. They'll roast you if they get the chance. With that being said, we are reviewing the Live A Live remake, which is a wonderfully beautiful and very fun RPG that showcases the magic Square really had back in the day, and shows how some of the stories and games they made can withstand the test of time. Quick TLDR, if you like any old Square RPGs in any capacity, you should definitely check this out. Let's get into it. Looking back at the footage for the likes of Octopath Traveler, which is the only real comparison for this game as far as graphics go, it almost seems like a few things with the HD 2D engine, or whatever they call it, have changed. Where Octopath looked very soft and shimmery, Live A Live scenes feel very bold, bright, and vibrant. That glow from Octopath doesn't seem to be present, at least not to me, and it's very welcome. A good nod to 3D visuals and beautiful 2D sprite work alike that, yes, was present in Octopath, but feels much more in your face here. It almost feels like an evolution of what a lot of scenes in Suikoden 2 look like to me. There's nothing insanely crazy here to speak on UI overall. Everything that is here does its job and does it very well. The menu UI is absolutely gorgeous and serves its purpose well, and the character select screen has a nice little bio for each chapter, letting you know what you'll be getting into. I think this goes without saying for any fan of retro RPGs that this seems to be the desired style going forward for remakes. I'd love to see games like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasies 1 through 6, Breath of Fire, and many others get this kind of treatment in the future. The music, my god, the music. Just the base scene music for each chapter is very good and captures the aesthetic and atmosphere of each era in a beautifully musical way. From the whistling tones of the Wild West to the atmospheric silence and ambience of the far future in space, each environment has music that encapsulates the setting perfectly, and the battles are so hype. The base battle music changes from chapter to chapter, with the main boss music being shared across all. The base battle music is so hype for some of these chapters, I found myself drowning with excitement and pumping my fists because they also use it to set the scale of some scenes. No real spoilers here, but there's a sequence at the end of the Earth and Heart Shifu chapter where the battle music played the entire time and it felt epic. This is definitely a soundtrack I'll be listening to outside of the game. There's no real complaints or talking points here about performance. Performance for this game is wonderful. Other than when you first load an already made save file from the title screen, the game loads so fast that it's nearly impossible to read the tips. This is not really a complaint, just something slightly funny that I thought I'd point out. They could have easily just put a static image between scenes and it would have looked fine. The tips are genuinely helpful though, when you can read them. As far as FPS goes, I only really ever noticed anything on the special effect for the boss vaporizing away after they're defeated, or when you use an AoE skill with a lot of particle effects, but they were very few and far between. Otherwise, the frame rate and performance are rock solid. The gameplay is so varied here from chapter to chapter that I find it hard to think anyone would not be able to find at least one thing they enjoyed. From crafting mechanics to laying traps to a really lengthy stealth sequence if you want to try a pacifist run and be rewarded for it later, there's plenty of variety here in the gameplay. I did find some chapters more interesting than others from a gameplay perspective, but honestly it's nice to go from a battle heavy chapter to a story heavy or mechanic heavy chapter right after. It's a good way to break up the monotony that turn-based RPGs generally have when it comes to random battles. The battles take place on a grid similar to a strategy RPG, and Live A Live could almost moonlight as one. But you have a turn gauge similar to the old Final Fantasy games that fills up over time. This leads to one of the things about the game that doesn't make a lot of sense, at least to me, and let me preface this by saying this could just be a problem that I alone had and maybe isn't even a problem at all. Maybe one of the tip screens speaks to this, but I assumed the turn gauge filled up based on your speed stat. However, there were times when my turn gauge was one movement away from having a turn, and a boss who had next to no turn gauge would go before I did. It didn't seem like a speed stat thing, because if that were the case, they would have had non-stop turns back to back. It made enemy turns pretty unpredictable, and even though it wasn't exactly a game-breaking bug or anything, it was a slight annoyance. Though I never really felt a lot of challenge from the battles themselves, it seemed as though the game was going for a strategy vibe, and with unpredictable boss ATB gauges, it felt like that was thrown out the door. Boss sprites are so comically large that it feels impossible not to hit them in some cases. In most battles, there is a level of strategy where you can work your way around the map and avoid getting attacked, provided you know the tiles the enemies or bosses' moves can hit. And in the random encounters, I never had much problem with the ATB gauge predictability for basic enemies. Again, this could only be an annoyance for me or a problem with the way that I read the ATB. There's also no MP for abilities, which I love. The only limit for using your skills is how far it can reach and the potential charge time it may have. Some skills can target tiles across the map, while others require you to be up close and personal. Skills that do require a charge can be interrupted if you're hit with the right attack, so there's a nice positioning mechanic there. You want to make sure you're somewhere you won't get interrupted, or that you can get the skill off before the enemy gets a turn. There are skills that change tiles to have different attributes, such as fire damage or poison, which adds another little level of complexity. Monsters have weaknesses and resistances as well. While I wasn't crazy about it at first, over time the battle system really grew on me, and I looked forward to every encounter. To prevent spoilers here, I'm going to be as vague as I can. Each story chapter was fairly satisfying in its own right, some more than others. You're rarely left without a real conclusion, though some chapters will leave you wanting to see what happens next, or wanting to spend more time with the characters because of their personality or story arc. These chapters at base level offer plot ideas that could easily be adapted into games of their own if they were further developed, but the concepts are there. This game does something I adore in storytelling, where some of the endings finish up like fairy tales and others with no good ending, or at least not without some sort of sacrifice. The final chapter takes the overarching story in an incredible direction, and there were some chapters that, combined with the setting and epic music like the Earthenheart chapter I mentioned earlier, had me on the edge of my seat with excitement to watch how things played out. Everything is written and voice acted so well, with a few small exceptions here and there with NPCs. That's all I'll say about the story without giving away any spoilers. If you want to see spoilers, feel free to watch the LPs we did for the game. With all of that being said, I am extremely satisfied with this game and definitely see myself playing it again in the future, looking for Easter eggs and deeper lore connections. Also, we didn't get Cube in the end game, so that would be pretty nice. If you liked Octopath, this is a definite yes. The combat is very easy to understand and fun to master, with the game being stunningly beautiful just to take a stroll through. If you've never played a classic RPG and are used to more modern games of the genre like Dragon Quest XI or Xenoblade 3, I think this is a really good place to start if you want to see why those classic RPGs had us captivated so long ago. Thank you all so much for watching, and here's to more HD 2D remakes like this in the future. Bye!